Well, welcome everyone this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are. It's really great to have everyone with us. I'm Stacey Stewart, President and CEO of March Times, and today we're going to be discussing 3 a.m. thoughts, things that keep new parents up at night. And this session is brought to all of us with the generous support and the sponsorship of Nook. So we want to thank Nook for sponsoring this session and this great conversation. Today, we're going to be discussing something that all new parents really probably want to understand more about, be able to talk about. And those are some of the thoughts and worries that new parents have when they're, especially in the middle of the night, when they're up doing those 3 a.m. feedings. It is so natural and so normal that new parents have the kinds of thoughts and worries that really just keep them up at night. And so we're hoping to really share some great information, have some great conversation. We have some fantastic panelists. We want to make sure everybody gets those thoughts and anxious thoughts addressed and kind of better understood, and hopefully get some better sleep, which obviously will help not only the mom but the baby as well. You know, we've seen through research, and research is showing that 90% of all new mothers do have anxious thoughts. So again, it is very normal. Moms worry about, I know I did, what if I drop the baby, or what happens if this happens or that happens, and am I feeding him or her properly? Is my baby getting enough milk? I mean, just so many things that run through your mind almost constantly on a loop. And you know, it's just very normal, but obviously it can be very distressing. The National Sleep Foundation has reported that 76% of new parents report getting significantly less sleep, and when they do, it's really not good quality sleep. Newborns sleep a lot, but they sleep in these 3 or 4 hour intervals, as we all know. And that's just not something that we're all used to, and certainly not really conducive to good quality sleep for a lot of parents. And then we've got everything else going on in the world, added to all of the typical anxiety in better times that any new parent would experience. We've got a global pandemic, we've got racial and social unrest, we've got elections coming up, and we've got just any number of things happening where, you know, if we've got older kids, we've got issues with homeschooling, distance learning, I mean, you name it, the list goes on and on. And so we have, you know, a lot to be worried about. Even in normal times, we have worries, but now those worries have just been exacerbated. And then we have, you know, not significant enough policies in place to really protect new parents and families and make sure they have the right support, which is why you'll see on my screen, we're advocating and demanding blanket change. If you want to know more about that, I'll talk about that later. But really, it's really demanding that we enact policies that will provide more support for families and make sure that they feel that they've got the right kinds of protections and from their employers, and just generally that they need to address their family's needs. So March Times' work is really all about this work. We are all about supporting new moms and families. We know that sleep and sleep deprivation and worry always happen. So we have to talk about these things, and we're really glad we're having this conversation today. And as a reminder, I want to make sure that you know, if you've got questions and thoughts, please use the chat box on Facebook if you're watching it, and we'll be able to answer some of those questions. We'll be able to take those. Our panelists will be able to answer any of your questions that you've got. So please remember to use the chat box, the comments, and we'll be also putting links to information that could actually be very helpful to you as well. So today and right now, I want to introduce our amazing panelists. I want to thank them for joining us. I'm going to start with just introducing Dr. Natasha Sriraman, who is a pediatrician and an associate professor of pediatrics at Eastern Virginia Medical School. She is in Norfolk, Virginia. She speaks around the country on various topics, including breastfeeding and postpartum depression and cultural differences in infant feeding and social determinants of health. She is very involved in legislative advocacy. She's worked with the Virginia Governor's Office on having May declared as Maternal Mental Health Month. She's currently in the board of directors of the Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She serves as diversity inclusion champion for the National AAP District 4 and is the honorary chair of Postpartum Support Virginia. So Dr. Sriraman, thank you for joining us. Antoinette Robinson is in Birmingham, Alabama. She is a board certified licensed professional counselor who specializes in working with those with perinatal mood disorders, depression, anxiety, and trauma. She's also a DONA International trained birth and postpartum doula. She currently partners with Strong Parent Program, with the Strong Parent Program, which helps new parents with low resources prepare for birth, for labor, and postpartum period. The postpartum period successfully. She also volunteers as a birth doula at Birthwell Partners. It's a nonprofit program that helps provide pregnant women who want a doula and may not have the resources for a doula to have that support if they need it, even if they don't have the ability to pay. So Antoinette, thank you for joining us. Natalie Willis is the CEO and founder of the Baby Sleep Trainer. She is a certified sleep consultant, an infant and toddler sleep coach with a client base of over 10,000 families. She's got tons of experience, and her program offers one-on-one consultations to parents, and online training series is offered to give parents access to affordable online instruction with hands-on support for children aged from birth through toddler. She's also published a book entitled Getting Your Baby to Sleep, a Baby Sleep Trainer Way. So she has written about this, she speaks about this, she provides tons of support to thousands of parents, and we're so pleased to have Natalie joining us. And then last but not least, we have Karen Kleinman. She is in Philadelphia, and she is a licensed clinical social worker, the founder and executive director of the Postpartum Stress Center. Karen founded the center. It's a treatment and training facility for prenatal and postpartum depression and anxiety disorders. She started in 1998. She has been an internationally known maternal mental health expert for over 32 years. Karen has written many, many books. Her first was This Isn't What I Expected, Overcoming Postpartum Depression. She co-authored that in 1994, and that really forged a whole new space in self-help with postpartum depression. Her latest book is Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts, which was recently released and has gotten rave reviews. And in addition to her books and clinical work, she teaches a postgraduate professional training course for clinicians who specialize in the treatment of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So we have an incredible panel of folks that have a tremendous expertise in helping moms and parents with their anxiety, stress, sleep, helping babies sleep, helping parents get some sleep. And I think a lot of the information is going to be very, very useful to a lot of us. So I want to just say thank you all for joining today. And I want to start with Dr. Sharaman. Again, thanks for being here. And as a pediatrician, I know you hear on a daily basis with all of the visits when parents are coming in for well visits with their babies. You're hearing a lot of different anxiety, a lot of different worries and thoughts that parents have. Can you talk about what you hear from parents, especially now in the midst of this pandemic, but just in general? What are you hearing from parents about what their thoughts and worries and anxiety and concerns really are?
Thank you so much for having me, March of Dimes. This is an honor to be on the panel with everyone. So as a pediatrician, I see babies within 24 to 48 hours after they leave the nursery. And the most common are feeding and growing issues, as every parent can attest to. The concern is, is my baby getting enough? Is my baby, how do I know they're getting enough? How do I know they're hydrated? And some of these concerns are compounded for our breastfeeding mothers because of maybe mixed messages they're receiving or unable to kind of gauge how to do it properly and things like that. These concerns have been obviously exacerbated with COVID. Many of our moms who are having normal deliveries are being discharged within 24 to 26 hours. And a lot of my moms who are having C-sections are out by 48 hours. So aside from just mom and baby getting used to each other, it's not, the mom is not getting a lot of support, whether it's nursing care, lactation care. Obviously the physical healing is a huge aspect of it. And the growth stages and things like that. A little bit down the road, which I know we're going to talk about, is how should my baby sleep? How long should my baby sleep? When should I start training? We get a lot of those questions as well. And I think just COVID has exacerbated those symptoms because maybe their birth didn't go as planned, which always, can happen, but many times, depending on the hospital, depending on the rates of COVID, depending if it's a vaginal delivery versus C-section, their partner, spouse, loved one may not have been at the delivery with them. We have moms who are delivering by themselves, unfortunately, or in the C-section. So many moms who were having that expectation of help, maybe it was grandma or an aunt or a sister coming, they're unable to travel. I have a lot of families who are immigrants or are not this is not their country of origin. So a lot of those family members haven't been able to obviously, fly into the United States. So it's just a lot of that stress is compounded, and I know all of us can attest to just how as mothers we can kind of question ourselves and things like that. So I feel that's a lot of my role is probably like 10% of the visit is checking the baby and the growth and jaundice and things like that. And I would say probably the other 85 to 90% is really talking to mom, holding her hand, and just really kind of telling her, it's going to be okay, and she's doing a great job, and things like that. It's really, and I think that's why, for me, being a pediatrician is such a great aspect, because it's not just about the baby, and mom and baby are still connected. And I get the honor of kind of taking care of both of them.
I love how pediatricians really are, looking after the baby and the mom. So I can remember my own pediatrician going in to see her with the baby, and she looked at me and she could tell I didn't seem well hydrated. And that was such a good thing for her to be able to, and my own doctors I would not have been seeing them. They would have not been able to tell me that. So that was really very, very helpful. Thanks so much. We're going to come back to you. I want to turn it to Antoinette. Antoinette, as a doula, talk to us about doulas. What do doulas really do, especially postpartum doulas? Because you've talked about that, and that's a part of your expertise as well. Just explain the important role that doulas play, and how doulas can really help parents both through pregnancy, but also postpartum as well.
Oh, okay, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on such a esteemed panel of smart, talented people. So thank you for having me. A birth doula, assists a mom in before the baby with a lot of prenatal education, a lot of evidence-based education on different topics. It depends on her situation and what kind of birth plan she's wanting, and then supports her physically and emotionally through labor. And a birth doula also follows up postpartum. One of the tenets of being a doula is also to help support breastfeeding. So they're there for the first latch and a couple of hours at the hospital, and then they follow up the weeks after. A postpartum doula takes over when mom gets home and follows mom and baby and family for the next 3 months for that fourth trimester. As a postpartum doula, I'm there to support mom in whatever way is necessary so that she can spend time taking care of herself and caring for her baby without the stress of all this other stuff that's going on. So that can look like anything depending on the family. It can be me doing laundry, helping with other siblings, helping with the pets, coordinating meal trees, helping with latch. Usually women within that first 2 weeks will have some breastfeeding challenges, and there's a postpartum doula who's trained to help with those challenges so you're more successful with breastfeeding. And research is showing that having a postpartum doula creates an overall sense of satisfaction for the whole birth experience, because you're not going home unsupported. And that support is very well educated and well trained and very knowledgeable, which has been helpful. With COVID, it looks different because you have to be very mindful going into someone else's space on how you can keep yourself safe and them as well and their baby. It's been very difficult helping moms transition in that fourth trimester. I know we're talking about sleep with the baby, but I've noticed a lot of clients, their sleep is off. There's no set morning, noon, and night. There's no set time to do things because you're at home all day. There's work, and of course you work from home, but even that, and school from home, but even that creates this whole new rhythm in a house. And so that has been difficult, helping parents and families get on a new rhythm. in group this morning, a mom remarked that it's been really hard for her to learn mom things because she can't interact with other moms in the way that we have traditionally been doing. And that has thrown her off because she's used to being with other people. And so now she's finding, she's trying to learn how to navigate the virtual world of support so that she can talk to other moms about sleep and what are they doing and talk to experts. So I guess if there's a positive, that's one, because now you have access to experts all over the country virtually, whereas before you didn't. So that's just been a challenge, but that's kind of what a birth and postpartum doula does, and how we've kind of had to change things up a little bit with COVID and the pandemic. It's been really interesting.
I'm trying to think about what new mom doesn't need a postpartum doula. I don't even know.
I don't know.
I think every mother it should have access to a postpartum doula for sure, and a doula in general, which would be great.
Yes. Yes.
So we'll come back to you, Antoinette, and I want to turn it to Natalie. Natalie, you have developed this sleep training method, and tell us a little bit about what inspired you to do that. What is it, and what inspired you to develop this method, and how do you think it's helpful to many new parents?
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm also honored to be with all of these wonderful, amazing women. So thanks for having me. I had my first child, well, both of my children, but my first child very young, and I certainly did not have access to a postpartum doula, unfortunately. And I was very isolated and alone. And before I had my child, I had heard about the concept of sleep training, which was very attractive to a type A personality like myself. So this concept that this child would come into my life and within a few days I could have it on a schedule and everything would go back to normal was very appealing to me. And I hope everyone that has had a child who is hearing me say this is laughing because of how ludicrous of a concept that is. And yet that was the story that I had told. And I think that that's what most sleep training experts at the time were making women feel like, that was possible. If you followed these plans, then, and I would say more importantly, the message I was getting was that if my child was not complying and sleeping well, it was because I was doing something wrong. I was not understanding the information that was available and I was not able to apply it properly. And that's why my child was having a problem. So when my child was not complying to where I thought she should have been, I started devouring information, and this was actually, she's 12 now. And so this was at the beginning of blogs and online support groups and that sort of thing. And so I really accessed a lot of that. And through the first several months of her life, I just became very passionate about the subject. And over time, I helped other families because I sort of developed a knack for really reading through the lines of what all the experts were saying. And as I have grown myself as a woman and become, I would say, more of an adult and more mature and understanding what's happening in the world, I've realized that sleep issues disproportionately with children disproportionately affect women. I think there's a reason that we are all sitting around talking about a subject that our government and our communities and our society should really be supporting and they aren't. And so over time, I did develop a method, and eventually I really worked to democratize information about sleep for families and for women, especially because there's a lot of competing voices. And I think because we have, in the United States, for better or worse, we don't have one distinct parenting style. And so what women, they'll feel very insecure in the choice they're making, because no matter what choice you're making, there's going to be somebody who's very vocal, who's telling you that you're doing it wrong. And that's usually because that person feels insecure about what they're doing. And so they are telling you you're doing something wrong to make themselves feel more secure about their choice. And so I really try to cut through that and create products that help families understand that sleep issues are normal. Some children have them more often, and that sometimes there's not a solution to every problem, but there's usually a lot of improvement that you can get around a child's sleep if you have a little bit of a better sense of understanding what's going on.
So you've been able to really provide a lot of support to a lot of families. We want to get into more of that in just a little bit. I want to introduce, though, Karen into the conversation. And Karen, you're sort of famous for your expertise and your ability to write about what a lot of new parents are thinking about, but sometimes too afraid to say out loud. And your new book, Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts, I think you're trying to capture some of that. So can you share a little bit about your latest book? What are some of these scary thoughts that moms are having that sometimes they're afraid to articulate? and how can you help them? And Karen, you may just need to unmute so we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I am unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
There
You're
we
all
go. Yes?
Yes.
What you said, thank you for the privilege of being here. Sorry for the technical problems, but you were
Okay.
forewarned. So you said, yeah, what moms are thinking and not being able to say. And that's just sort of a perfect description. I've been watching this for over 3 decades of moms struggling and not knowing a safe place to say this out loud and not knowing what these scary thoughts are. Let me back up and tell you what scary thoughts are. It's our word for negative, intrusive, unwanted, anxiety-driven thoughts that accompany all of us throughout life, that it is a universal phenomenon. With new moms and dads, by the way, the statistic is almost, that you mentioned, almost 91% of all moms and 88% of all dads. And this is moms and dads who have not been diagnosed with clinical depression or anxiety. This is every mom and every dad. And so it is so universal. It happens to every single one of us. But without this information, they're scary as hell. And we don't know what this means if we're having these thoughts that range from what we would call maybe normal thoughts, like, oops, what if I drop the babies? What if I fall down a step? What if the bathtub is too hot? And then the continuum goes to, we won't talk about them because they're scary and they're triggering, but the continuum goes to very scary, terrifying, graphic kinds of images and, or could I be doing these things to my baby? And what we know as clinicians is that the scary ones over here are actually not any scarier clinically than these over here, but to the mom who's experiencing it, it feels like a good mother would not have these thoughts. And so what happens is it chains her into seclusion and isolation. She thinks she's going mad, and she doesn't dare tell anybody what these thoughts are, regardless of how much distress they cause her. And so I teamed up with Molly McIntyre, who's the artist involved, and we started the hashtag Speak the Secret, which was created to basically shatter the myth of scary thoughts. Tell us what your scary thoughts are, because we've discovered clinically that women feel better when they talk about it in a safe place where they know that they're not going to be judged, or God forbid, their baby being taken away, or they're a bad mother, and so forth. So when people who are trained and understand these thoughts can listen to you, moms feel better. So we created this forum where moms talked about their scary thoughts. And I mean, we've got tons and hundreds of really scary thoughts, and women started giving us the feedback that it feels better and it feels validating and they feel less alone and isolated. So we created comics to go with it to make it more relatable and make it more digestible for moms who are overwhelmed. And it's the book itself, which is easy to read, and it's sort of a fun way of addressing an extraordinarily serious topic. It makes it more okay for moms to have these thoughts, to say them out loud, and to figure out what the next steps are, to what to do about getting some relief.
So I want to actually follow up with you on that, and then others can jump in too. I mean, my understanding and my guess is that there's scary thoughts that are kind of more normal scary thoughts, and then there's scary thoughts that come up that may be an indication of more serious issues, maybe around postpartum depression. I mean, and maybe we could just clarify that in terms of what do you identify as a scary thought that's more in line with the 91% of all women having these thoughts versus, a smaller percentage of women who really have thoughts that can be very, very concerning and are really, an indication of more serious mood disorder or depression or anxiety.
I missed the first part of your question. I'm sorry, but if you're asking me how to determine what's scary and what's not, what do we need to address and what's more normal? Is that what you're asking me, Stacey?
Yeah. When are scary thoughts just more kind of quote unquote normal scary versus an indication of something more serious?
So the easiest way to describe this is that it's not it's not actually the thought itself, it's actually the amount of distress it causes you. And the distress is defined by what we call frequency, duration, and intensity. So it's how often is this happening? How bad is it for you, and how long has this been going on? And so suffering is subjective. And so what bothers you may not bother me, and what bothers me may not bother her. But if the distress is so high that it's interfering with my ability to function, if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing because I'm so worried about the way I'm feeling, then it's time to get some support for this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And others, so would you like to chime in on that, Antoinette, or others?
I would. I get a lot of moms who are concerned about how they don't feel. So they may dream that they've lost their baby and not care. Mm-hmm. And worry that somehow that indicates a lack of love or a lack of caring for your baby who you love and you want to care for. Those thoughts are not as distressful as mom may seem, because sometimes I think we forget that we grow to love our children, because it's hard. Having a newborn is hard. And part of growing to love them is caring for them. And you will have these intrinsic thoughts. But kind of like Karen was saying, how frequent is this? How intense is it? Is it keeping you from doing things that you would normally do? Is it keeping you from caring for your kid? Are you being neglectful in that sense? That's when you want to be concerned in a very clinical way. If mom is avoiding her baby, then I might be concerned if it's more than one day. We have all, if you've had a child, there are days you don't want to be bothered or touched that day. We've touched out. That's different than if someone never wants to have their kid around, or the sound of their babies crying makes them have a panic attack. Those kinds of things. I see a lot of this with moms who've had traumatic birth, or they've had their baby taken from them and didn't get to do the skin to skin and the normal bonding in that golden hour after birth. Sometimes they will have some thoughts because they didn't get those things, and there's a regret that they carry that comes with their birth. But if they can talk to someone and be reassured that the way they're feeling is typical, and also talk to someone who can say, well, yes, this is a concern, but this is how we can address it. Because sometimes just having the answer is helpful, and not being so isolated and alone in your thoughts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can I respond to that real fast?
Sure. Yeah.
Antoinette, that's such a great thing that you brought up, and the trauma involved with so many moms. And I do want to say there's a conundrum that's taking place right now, because with social media, we've got this great explosion of moms talking about it, normalizing, validating it, that these thoughts are okay. Good mothers have these thoughts. We know that. But at the same time, when we're normalizing scary thoughts, then we're also running the risk of it's all okay. And if somebody's really suffering, or if there's trauma involved and she doesn't understand that actually that's too much suffering, So in our quest to normalize and help moms speak out on their own behalf and get validation, we also want to make sure we empower them with the skills that we're talking about, how to differentiate between what's okay for you and what's not okay for you.
And Stacey, I don't know if I could jump in.
You can always jump in.
To kind of, so like as a pediatrician in our health system, we screen for postpartum depression because we see moms so frequently and so much earlier than their 6-week postpartum visit. And I think what is so important for us as physicians and even our nurses is that the education piece for those of us who are caring for these moms and babies, because until I learned about it and start educating my social workers and nurses, it comes across as, oh my gosh, mom wants to harm her baby. And that can go a completely different way, which I have seen in clinical practice, really kind of defeating the purpose. And then we lose the trust of the mom and so on and so forth. And I think because this is, my passion, the fact that I ask moms is just what I notice immediately is that their shoulders just completely relax. Like they're just like, because they're never, so when I talk about it or I teach about it, I always say a mother's never, at least in our situation, a mother's never going to offer that on her own accord. She's never going to say, I'm having these scary thoughts of, falling down the stairs or the X, Y, and Z. So when we ask about it, it's just that relaxation, that their whole body the whole body language changes, and they just feel like the sense of relief that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy. And again, what Karen and Antoinette said, of course, there are some moms who may have had a strong history of mental health, mental illness. So of course, parsing that out, like, a lot of my moms unfortunately stop their medications when they're pregnant, or they are told they can't take their medications while they're breastfeeding. That's a whole other topic. So really guiding them on that path, because again, obviously the frequency and duration, intensity, but I think there's also that piece of those of us who care for these mom baby dyads, educating about intrusive thoughts, because I think we have a long way to go on that side of the table, because a lot of us are not aware, like colleagues, nurses, even our social workers, and that can really fail the mom. I remember I had a friend of mine, and I was telling her about these intrusive thoughts, and she was way past the initial postpartum period, and she goes, I never told my husband how I felt. I thought there was something wrong with me. This was 5 years later, and she had held on to it for so long. So just that sense of relief.
Just to piggyback on that, Natasha, in case any healthcare providers happen to be listening, asking the question is so paramount, but also preempting it, as you said, with the psychoeducation piece, which says to mom, I know what intrusive thoughts are. I know what they mean. I know they're anxiety driven. You do not have to be afraid to tell me. You are in a safe place. Your baby won't be taken away. And you don't have to say all those things, but providing the psychoed to let her know that you know exactly the origin of these thoughts and what they mean, then she knows that she's in a safe place. And it's so great that pediatricians are doing this now. I cannot tell you how good it feels. And I think women feel very comfortable with their pediatrician by and large to be able to have this conversation. I don't think all pediatricians are on board and see it as part of the scope of their practice. So to see that trending now is just really great.
Yeah, and I think it's especially important, obviously, baby steps with getting pediatricians on board. But I think even more so, part of the reason we started doing this in our practice and our health system is that what we were seeing, a lot of moms of color and a lot of our moms where English is not their primary language, when I started doing this research about 10 years ago, they were getting screened at their 6-week OB visit, but a lot of my moms weren't even going to the 6-week screen. I mean, they weren't even going to the 6-week visit because of maybe, like Antoinette said, they had a traumatic birth. They were not treated well. They don't know how to navigate the system because of a language barrier, insurance loss, things like that. So they weren't even being asked these questions because they were never setting foot back into that office.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I want to just that was fantastic, and I think it's obvious that there's a lot more that healthcare professionals are learning about how to help moms, especially dealing with some of these challenging thoughts and this anxiety and worry that they naturally will have, and knowing how to intervene when necessary. Now, I want to ask you, though, to get back to this idea of how sleep and the lack of sleep complicates all of this. Talk about a little bit more about what you do to help parents manage their worry and anxiety by making sure that the babies get enough sleep, and then how does that then help the parents get the kind of sleep that they need to kind of manage their mental health as well?
Yeah,
and overall physical health too, I should say.
Of course. And I think it's a bit of an elephant in the room, if I'm going to be honest, because if a mom is having intrusive thoughts, or if she's having diagnosed postpartum mood disorders, maybe she had a mood disorder before, maybe it's crept up, it's going to be very difficult. And in some cases, it might not be possible for her to really overcome these struggles until her sleep is in order. And the reason that that's a really difficult thing to admit is because we have a lot of feelings around mom and sleep in our society. And I think that there's an undercurrent of, if mom prioritizes her need to sleep, then there's an aspect of like selfishness there, especially if it gets to the point where the child is old enough where sleep training might need to occur. And even just using that term can be so loaded and so heavy. And that's because for some children, or really for all children, who sleep training at its core is a child learning how to go from being awake to being asleep independently. so that they can use the skill of independent sleep to put themselves back to sleep when they wake up at night, assuming they're waking up at a time when they don't require something from their parent. So think of assisted sleep as training wheels, right? So taking the training wheels off so that your child can fall asleep independently. And then as children grow older, especially after the 4th month, their sleep patterns change and they will often wake up at the end of every sleep cycle. So sometimes they might wake up as often as every 45 to 90 minutes and require physical assistance. Sometimes for many women, it's in the form of breastfeeding. And so nobody else can provide that assistance. Or unfortunately, we might be in a situation in which a mom can't rely on her partner in order to help. And there might be a variety of things that's going on. And yet sleep is a huge piece of this. And so I really advocate for women to advocate on their own behalf and know that it is okay to advocate on their own behalf of needing to sleep and knowing that they need to prioritize that. And in the same way that you need to verbalize, I'm thirsty, or you need to verbalize, I need food. No one has any problem with creating a meal train, right? We all know that it might be impossible for a woman to feed herself or her family. But as soon as we get to a point where we're like, part of this issue might need to be the child learning how to sleep independently so that you're then able to have your sleep in order. That's a conversation that I'm working really, really hard to normalize. And it's just people sometimes, I don't know if the other experts on this panel have had any experience with that, but it can be really a tenuous thing. And I think people might, in my space where I've worked with other experts, I think when people are early in their careers, especially if they are early mothers, they might have particular feelings about sleep training and not think that it's really great or really appropriate. But I often find that with time, almost any expert in the maternal space is going to be like, well, I can actually see like a number of times where I understand why a woman might need to make this choice. And so I would say that being aware that it's something that you might need to do and that that's okay. And talking, I always encourage my clients that even in my online course, I have a whole list of questions that I have them discuss with their pediatrician, because really it should be your medical professional that's talking to you about the safety and efficacy of any kind of sleep training method or program that you want to implement. And that really brings parents a lot of peace of mind. So I would encourage moms who are having concerns or fears around this, especially if they're reading a lot of the misinformation that's around on the internet, to go straight to their pediatrician and say, here's a problem I'm having. This is what I would like to do. Do you have any thoughts? This person, their pediatrician, should be the one that is the most up to date on the studies and the data and can really help bring a lot of peace to a parent so that she is then able to proceed with whatever training method she thinks is appropriate.
Great, that's very helpful. And we're getting some questions on Facebook, and I just want to pose this first one to Dr. Sharaman, and then others can chime in. There's a question about what is safe sleep and why is it important even when parents are exhausted?
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on Natalie, everything she said. I think, like you mentioned, I think talking to us, because unfortunately there is a lot of misinformation out there, and if you sleep train too early, that can be dangerous, because if a child is sleeping too long, it can affect their actual calorie intake and weight loss, and that is a whole cascade of issues. And I really want to point out, because as someone who does a lot of breastfeeding work, as Antoinette has already spoken to, is that breastfeeding and mom getting enough sleep are not, they don't have to work against each other. And again, based on the mom situation, the family situation, the cultural issues, really finding what works for that individual, that mom, that family unit. And obviously in the early stages, it's too early to sleep train a baby, but that doesn't mean if a mom is struggling with her mental health, we still want her to try to get, I work with a perinatal psychiatrist, and her goal is like, I need you to sleep 5 hours straight. So how do we make that work for that family? Do I teach that mom to start pumping early and someone else gives a bottle? Or, give some formula at night. I'm of the philosophy, I have 3 kids, I struggle with breastfeeding. I'm of the philosophy, some is better than none, but it can't worsen mom's mental health. And trying to find what works for that family. Again, coming and talking to us about sleep training, we usually don't recommend anything before 4 months of age, but that is also very variable based on how early the baby was born, how the baby's growing, things like that. Safe sleep is constituted as putting the baby on the back in their own safe space. We discourage against safe sleep, and we discourage against co-sleeping. No pillows, no blankets, things like that. Usually around 4 to 5 months of age, the baby will start developmentally. Of course, this is taking into context that this is a full-term baby, not a premature baby. You always start putting them on their back, but they will start rolling over and things like that. Minimizing other risks that can affect safe sleep. Is there a smoker in the house? Smoking is a huge risk factor for SIDS and things like that. So, but really kind of taking into context that a mom doesn't have to be sleep deprived. And what Natalie said, I think there's this expectation in our society that we're just supposed to be up every 2 hours. I see it, unfortunately, in the medical field. I remember just coming into the office and just sobbing because I was so sleep deprived because I was nursing every hour and a half. And just trying to counsel the moms that, find something that works for you so you can get at least 4 to 5 hours, so both, we see sometimes both parents getting up and feeding and changing diapers, how do we tailor that? And of course, taking the cultural context in. I think what Natalie said, sleep training sometimes is seen as harsh. Families from like where I'm originally from, and a lot of my families who are immigrants, the thought of having sleep training and having a baby learn to sleep on their own with a little bit of crying is not acceptable. So really finding what works for that family, but safe,
that family.
It's kind of that, that safe space for the baby.
Sure.
Can I just point out in response,
Absolutely.
please, that it's again, it's so nice to see these things evolving. There was a time when obstetricians and pediatricians and every specialty sort of just talked about their specialty, and now we're just seeing such an overlap of these issues that therapists used to be, at least when we started, we used to be that place where, okay, let's hear what this doctor said, let's hear what this doctor said, let's hear what you want to do, what your mother-in-law wants you to do, and let's come up with the best solution for you, and to sort of tease all of that out together, because she doesn't know how to prioritize because she's sleep deprived and she doesn't know what to do. So to hear the doctors that she's connecting with and that she trusts help her make these priorities is just so comforting to her. These are places, her pediatrician and is the place she trusts to take care of her baby, and for to know that pediatricians are now taking into consideration her mental health on top of the baby's well-being is extraordinary.
Yeah, that's
Wonderful.
really good. Antoinette, I want to just go ahead and chime in, Antoinette. Looks like
Okay.
Nancy.
Yeah, if I could jump in a second. I know a lot of times with new parents, they will say that they want to start sleep training their 2-week-old. But that speaks more to their exhaustion level than the need for that baby to sleep through the night. And so when someone says that to me, that's letting me know that they're not sleeping. They don't have a system in place that supports them taking a nap, things like that. A postpartum doula can help with that. If you can't afford a postpartum doula, one of the things I try to tell moms when they're pregnant is starts at training your support system to take care of you. So teach the husband to do laundry, this, that, and the other, so you don't have to do it. Find one person you trust to come in and watch your baby. You nurse, you go lay down. If you don't sleep, that's fine. Because what you're doing is you're creating a pattern and a routine. So now your body's getting used to nursing and laying down and resting. Nursing, lay down, and rest. If you want to lay down and cuddle your baby, that's fine. But you also want to be mindful that that baby is safe when they're with you. A lot of things, I don't know if every state does this, but we have the baby box. So you can put your baby safely in a baby box, and the baby box can be on the bed with you. It's not big. Babies outgrow it around 5 months, somewhere between 4 and 6 months, they outgrow it. But you can still have your baby with you, but you're training your brain to nurse and relax, nurse and relax. And before you know it, it's nurse and nap, so that you can get more rest. And I also encourage new parents to get rid of all these unnecessary expectations that don't work. Like, get rid of expectations. Let them go and deal with what your family's rhythm is. Deal with what your family needs to see happen. Like, think about what you need, and then work with like a doula, a postpartum doula, a friend who's gone through this several times, aunt who's had situations similar to this. Talk to them about things that may have worked for them, and then try it out. And then
So I love what you said about training. Instead of training your baby to sleep at the very, very beginning, train your partner to help both of you all sleep. That's a really good idea. And then you can train the baby, right? I think that's really good. You know, there's another question that just came on. I just want to make sure we get this in from Facebook. And I think, Antoinette, you touched on this, but Natalie, you may want to touch on it too. What can parents do to get themselves back to sleep once they're awake and anxious? I love how you said nurse and sleep and train your brain. Angie, I don't know if you want to add to that, or Natalie, if you wanted to sort of address that as well.
I can add to it quickly. There's always swaddling. And I encourage parents to take the time after birth and get to know your baby, because you start to find out your baby likes and dislikes and what brings them pleasure and what doesn't. Some babies love being swaddled, and some babies absolutely hate it. Some babies love a dark room, and some babies are unstimulated. They're understimulated and they can't relax. So you have to take this time and observe your baby and find out what your baby likes, and then try some things. Like, this is a time to experiment. This is new for them. This is new for your baby. This is new for you. You guys have to kind of work together to figure out how you're going to help each other. So, but swaddling is always good, and creating a routine. Babies love routine. They may not always follow it, but even if they don't, you can create a routine where we do this during daylight. In the morning, this is this. At night, I lowered the lights. Everybody gets a little bit more quiet. We spend more time in your room. And so babies get used to a certain routine. And so does mom. And people find comfort in routines. They really do.
And don't underestimate the impact that same routine has on mom's brain and helping her go to sleep when she's overstimulated and anxious also.
Absolutely. Natalie,
Sorry.
did you want to add in too?
Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you, Karen.
So I want to touch on that, and I have one other thing to say before I get there, which is something that can be really helpful if anyone's here who's pregnant or might be pregnant again, and we're giving a lot of advice, and it's helpful sometimes to give really specific advice. So it's helpful to keep a list of things that you would wish that you had the energy to do, but aren't really getting to. So maybe it's doing laundry, maybe it's cleaning the bathroom, maybe it's cleaning out the refrigerator, maybe it's whatever, and just start to keep a list. And then when you have friends that come over and they're like, what can I do to help? You can say, you know, there's a whole list of things on the fridge, pick anything you want. That would be really helpful for me. And so that's one piece of actionable advice someone might take. As far as how to get back to sleep, this was a problem I had because once my daughter Olive was up, like that was it. We were up. She was in a pretty decent pattern where she'd go to bed and she'd get up and eat and she'd go back to sleep. But that second time that she woke up around 3 a.m., that was pretty much going to be it, because I knew from that point going forward, and this is very typical pattern for infants, she was going to be up more frequently. So what a lot of people will notice is every subsequent time that your child wakes, you may find that they wake more frequently from that point going forward. And unfortunately, that tends to coincide with the time that you want to be getting the deepest sleep, which is typically, let's say, between 1 and 6 a.m., right? So it's really problematic if your baby is asleep, maybe in the bassinet next to you, and you're completely awake and you can't go back to sleep because you know they're going to be awake again in another, however many minutes, whether it's 60 or 90. So a couple of things you can do is, if your pediatrician has given you the okay for your child to sleep in a separate room, and that can vary depending on the age and circumstances, or even if your child is in the room with you, but they're maybe against a wall and a little bit farther away. Something I had my partner do is when I would hear the baby, I would get up and get the baby and nurse the baby. And typically if you nurse in very low light, or even feed a bottle in very low light, your own body, the melatonin present, is going to start to flow again. But where I find it can be really problematic is that moment when you're unlatching the baby and then you have to get up to go and put them back or walk them over to their room or to their bassinet or wherever it might be. So one thing is, see if you can get yourself trying to get relaxed while they're nursing. And then when they're done nursing, wake your partner up, give them the baby, make your partner be the one who's dealing with the transition from that point going forward. Another thing that you can do is, once you've done that successfully, even if you're having a hard time, is adopt a meditation or a deep breathing practice. I'm so thankful that another thing that's really becoming normalized in our culture is deep breathing. And meditation doesn't even have to be as elaborate as it can be. It really can just be a matter of, there's a couple of different breathing patterns people can look up online, but my favorite one, and I just did it last night because I still have trouble sleeping, is I breathe in to the count of 4 and then I breathe out to the count of 4. And every time I do one cycle, I count on a finger. And my goal is to get through it all 10 times without thinking about something else. And if something else comes to my mind, I just restart the breathing. And really what you need to do is I have a lot of anxiety. People who can't sleep because of their anxiety, well, often what's happening is I think their executive function is just, it's on, and you need to give it something to think about. You can try to picture your home and count every window in your home. You can pick a room in your home and count everything that's brown. You can think about your closet. Find something to focus your executive function on. And typically, if you can just do that for a few minutes, sleep will come before you know it. And those are the types of things that you can do to really get more sleep in your home.
Wow, that's really helpful. You know, we had another question on Facebook too, and it kind of goes back to this issue of postpartum depression and anxiety. And Karen, I may turn it to you, and then others can chime in. The question is, if you think someone's struggling. So if you think someone's struggling, if you have a friend or, you know, you're a partner of a mom, for example, who's struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety, how can you help them? What advice would you tell that partner, that friend, or that family member if they think that they're seeing that new mom with postpartum depression, anxiety? What advice do you have for them?
Good question. One of the things we hear moms say all the time is when they do have postpartum depression is, I just don't feel like myself. It almost feels diagnostic to those of us who do this work. We don't even have to know what that means. I just don't feel like myself. So if a friend or a partner or a loved one says, you don't seem like yourself, right? That just, it just means so much. Often women will get defensive. They, you know, this pretense of keeping everything perfect because good moms are supposed to look good and be happy and so forth. It's really hard, even with a best friend, to admit that I'm vulnerable, I'm scared, I don't like being a mother, or I'm sick, or I'm in trouble or something. So if you're a close person, a close friend, a close loved one, somebody that we know that she trusts, you say it and you say it again. I'm worried about you. I don't like what it feels to me like you're struggling or suffering. And then you offer some solutions. You know, do you want me to go with you to the doctor? Do you want me to call your doctor with you or for you? Do you want me to talk to your partner? How can I help? And usually open-ended questions are not helpful when somebody's really struggling. It really helps much more, you know, sort of as Natalie was saying, here are the things you can do. I've already given it that thought. Here they are, pick one. Same thing. I'm going to go to the doctor with you, or give me your doctor's number, come with me, let's call, that kind of thing. Because moms who are symptomatic are usually paralyzed by their symptoms and or their shame. So to build that bridge, you want to join with her and sort of, I mean, I'm a little sort of an in-your-face kind of friend. If I think you're suffering, come on, let's go. I would not wait for somebody to come to me to help them if I think that they're in trouble. And that's sort of what I would tell best friends.
That's really good. Dr. Sharaman, you know, we have a lot of families whose babies end up in the NICU. And then you've got a whole nother set of issues around sleeping and the mom sleeping, and maybe they're in the NICU and with the baby, maybe the baby comes out of the NICU and then has other challenges. We also have a question about babies that have other kinds of physical challenges like colic or reflux. What are some special tips you can give parents about dealing with kids and babies, newborn babies that may have, you know, special circumstances in this way, and how do you address those kinds of things around sleep for those parents?
Yeah, great question. I think that obviously we know the rates of postpartum depression amongst new moms in general. So that is actually probably even double for our moms in the NICU. Obviously, if you look at the set of circumstances, there may be issues of they had trouble getting pregnant, or obviously things didn't go. There are also obviously the financial worries, but obviously the worry of, is their baby going to survive, or so that's a whole other set of issues than maybe the mom who brought their baby home within 2 days. So where we are, we actually are screening moms in the NICU because a lot of times these moms are there for so long. So we're establishing that rapport, whether it's with the nurse or the social worker and things like that. And in our institution specifically, we have like virtual support. Now they're virtual, but support groups that are specific to NICU moms because that they have their own set of circumstances. when you come home with a baby with special needs, or I think there was a question about reflux and colic and sleep and things like that. Again, really shoring up who's going to be there when you come home with the baby with special needs is very challenging. Just, managing just the day to day. And then a lot of these kids have extra appointments and the way the healthcare system is set up, it's not always amenable to certain days and times and things like that. So really encouraging those moms to find that team, find that tribe who's going to help her, whether it's with the premature baby, but also the older siblings. I think one point is that a lot of these moms who are in the NICU for so long, the reason to really talk to them and consider them is that a lot of the time these moms are not going back for their OB check. So their physical health is suffering as well as their mental health, and no one's really checking in on them because, 6 weeks could come and go and things like that. Again, who's supporting them. I think our NICU nurses do a great job of that. Mom, you need to go home and get some rest. Mom, you need, let dad come or let grandma come and things like that. Of course, this has all been challenged a little bit with COVID, minimizing folks coming in and out of the hospital, especially in ICU setting. In terms of reflux and colic aside, if it's a non-premature baby, again, like Natalie mentioned, talking to your pediatrician, we have a lot of normal and really setting the expectations for parents, like all babies spit up. Again, these are normal growth babies, whether you're breastfed or bottle feed, every baby has reflux. We don't necessarily worry if they're growing, if they're thriving, things like that. And I think moving away from the expectation that they're not supposed to spit up, they're not, they're going to be fussy and how to manage that. We see this a lot with the colic when the babies start cluster feeding. And that sensation that, oh my God, my baby's nursing every hour. There's something wrong with my milk, or I need to do something different. And setting that expectation ahead of time, I think is important, because that's probably one of the most common reasons we get calls is that my baby is spitting up.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. And, I feel like we could go on and on with this conversation. It's so incredibly helpful. And there are so many issues with having a new baby, and so many things to think about. But what we want to do is make sure that moms know that being anxious and worrying is normal, and there's always support, and you always have the right to ask for support and help from those around you that can provide it. So that's a good reminder that all of you have provided. We have to bring this to a close because we're at the hour mark. I just want to end with a couple of things. One is that we do have a bunch of resources to help families. So in addition to everything that everyone's heard now from all of these amazing panelists, I want to thank them for joining us. Here are a bunch of resources that are here on the March of Dimes page around safe sleep, caring for your baby, postpartum depression. Of course, our panelists have access to a lot of resources. The Postpartum Stress Center, as you've heard from Karen, Birthwise in Birmingham from Antoinette, Baby Sleep Trainer, and all of the great work that Natalie is working on and talking about. Of course, Karen's book is available, and Natalie's obviously an author as well. So we want to certainly thank all of our great panelists for being a part of this today. And please feel free to follow up with any of these resources for more information. Last thing I want to say is that a part of how we are able to bring all of this great content to you all is, one, because of the great sponsorship and support from companies like Nook, which we again thank Nook for sponsoring this, but also from the great support that we get so many people who support the March of Dimes and the work that we're doing. And I just want to remind everyone that there's a great way to do that through Amazon Smile. So as we're coming up on holidays, a lot of you all will get a chance to do a lot of shopping. I know a lot of people will be doing even more of their holiday shopping on Amazon and other areas. If you are so inclined, please sign up for Amazon Smile and designate the March of Dimes as a beneficiary for your holiday purchases. The last thing I mentioned is something I started with, which is this is an important season for elections. It's an important season right now to make sure that you're aware of the policy changes that are needed to make sure that every mom and every baby is safe and healthy. And we have to understand that we are today living in the most dangerous developed nation in the world in which to give birth. It is really shocking to hear, but it is true. And that's why the March Times, we have a whole campaign right now called #BlanketChange. Follow us on social media, either March of Dimes, or you can follow me, March of Dimes CEO, and learn more about Blanket Change. But you can also go to blanketchange.org and sign up to be an advocate for healthy moms and strong babies. We need everybody's voice, and we need you to demand a set of policy changes. You can see what those are, what the agenda is on blanketchange.org, but sign up on blanketchange.org. Be a part of our Advocacy Action Center. Tweet at that member of Congress or someone running for office, either for Congress. You can tweet at a presidential candidate. You can tweet at a state official who's running for office. It can be a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter. We need everybody involved in the fight for moms and babies. So sign up to be a part of Blanket Change, and we'd appreciate you being an advocate for moms and babies. So again, thank you to our panelists. You guys were amazing. We appreciate you joining. Appreciate everybody being a part of this session today. And join us for upcoming sessions of Healthy Moms and Strong Babies. Again, thank you, Nook, for sponsoring, and we're grateful to everyone for joining us today. So thank you so much, and take care, everybody. Thanks again to our panelists.